Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Good morning, I should say. It's not yet noontime here in New York City. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So glad you can be here. Yeah, let's jump into it.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Awesome, everybody. Awesome. So glad to be back. And just so you know, folks, we are now going to be streaming a lot more. This channel was silent for couple months, and now we've got this whole beautiful room here just for streaming. We got this whole room, and we're going to be on here a lot more, talking about a lot of stuff. Now, the way we do things here, for those who may not be familiar, if you're new, the way we tend to do things is that I give some opening remarks about what's on my mind for today. And then after that, we do a roll call. We find out who's listening, who's on the other side of the camera. And then after that, after we do the roll call, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the stream. So if you have something you want me to talk about, there's something you want me to address in the second half of the stream, just shoot me a super chat question. I'll be writing them down throughout the stream, and I will answer them in the second half. And that's how we tend to roll here. Like I said, we're going to be doing morning streams. We're going to be doing evening streams. We're going to be doing afternoon streams. We're going to be, streaming a lot, and that's why the Caleb Maupin videos channel is where I'm going to be posting a lot of the compilations and stuff, because we want to keep the notifications open for streams like this, because there's going to be a lot of them. I'm just going to be on here a lot because I've got a lot to say. It's been way too long. Now, if you want to watch, you can watch this on Facebook. You can watch this on YouTube. You can also watch it on Rockfin. We're on Rockfin now. And Rockfin, if YouTube decides they're going to take me down, Rockfin will not ban me. So I'll be here. And on top of that, in addition to that, I'm going to start doing stuff on Rumble also. I've synced my Rumble channel with my YouTube channel. And I'm going to do Rumble streaming as well. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Be sure you hit that notifications bell so you get notified when we're going to do a stream. Because if you don't hit that notifications bell, YouTube messes with us. We just got to keep going. I know this is a great time. Shout out to all my friends in Europe. Shout out to Katie in Luxembourg. Shout out to Karen in Germany. Shout out to all the Brits that are tuning in, my good British friends. This morning streams like this are good for you British folks, right? It's good for you British folks, right? Because when I usually stream like late at night our time, it's like the crack of dawn over there. So this is cool. I want to do more morning streams. I woke up this morning. I looked over what I'm doing for work today, and I talked about a meeting that I was having later today that's been set up, and I drank some unnamed diet beverage, put on some classical music, talked to my wife, and now I'm in this room streaming. It's awesome. Like I said, a lot more streams, a lot more streaming is going to be going on. We're just going to be on here a lot. So, you're under no obligation to listen to every stream, right? And I've there's been times where I have been where I've been, streaming a lot, and people are like, "Oh my God, Caleb, I can't keep up." You don't have to watch every stream. If you got shit to do, you got shit to do. But I'm going to be on here a lot. This is going to be a very active channel, and I really love having all of you here. We're a real community. This community is so important to people. It's really, really important to people. For the next little bit, It's going to be tunnel vision, folks. Tunnel vision. I know there's a lot of people saying a lot of stuff. Not even going to name names, but, you know, we're back. I am so happy to be back. I have never been happier to be back. I'm here streaming with all of you. And, you know, there was somebody, won't say the name, there was somebody on YouTube last night who confirmed everything in the comeback video, confirmed everything I said in the comeback video. One of the people that was intimately involved in the process, one of the streamers, he's mad about something else, whatever. He confirmed everything I said. So if you have any doubts that I'm telling the truth, go and listen to them. It's confirmed. Everything I said in the comeback video. These people had every opportunity to raise it internally. They didn't. The victim didn't want to, the sex worker didn't want to come forward. They've confirmed everything. They've confirmed everything, that these people were not really concerned about getting justice for anything. They just wanted to harm me. I mean, it's all confirmed. I mean, it's all confirmed, right? There are multiple people coming forward now. I think Chris Morlock on Twitter, he did his own investigation. Everyone is saying that everything I said in my comeback video is 100% correct. I am telling the truth, and some other people lied. They lied. There were lies they were telling people that weren't even in the goddamn document. So I don't want to spend more time talking about it. I'm done addressing that. But, you know, I am vindicated. My name has been cleared. You know, I'm not an evil, maniacal cult leader. I'm not a sexual predator. And, you know, I've been done dirty. I have been done dirty, and my name has been cleared. And now I'm back. And so is the Center for Political Innovation. We've been having a little bit of trouble with the CPI website. All right. Writing it down. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Right. Very good. DG said. All righty. Very good question. If folks have more super chats, please just shoot them my way. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's great. Everything that I said is confirmed. And these people, you know, they're going to keep lying. They really want me to go away now. They're really desperate to make me go away again because, you know, that's what they're about. These people are losers. You know, and they were given opportunities by me and fell on their faces, did not seize them. They're determined. They made the choice. They want to be losers. And the only thing that can give them consolation in being losers is stopping somebody else. Well, you know, at least they're losers, but, you know, so Caleb was going somewhere and they stopped him. Well, they didn't stop me. You didn't stop me. I'm back. I'm keeping going. But at the same time, you know, that's all they've got. That's all they've got. That's all they've ever done in their lives. And I don't want to say too much about it because, again, tunnel vision. We're going to focus on our own stuff here. And that's what we're going to do. So, yeah, you know, if you want to tweet this out, please tweet it out. You know, just some business. I know this isn't what you all came here for. You all came here for the politics and stuff like that. But, you know, just real quick, my new Twitter handle, since I'm back on Twitter, is Real Caleb Maupin. So go and follow me on my new Twitter, Real Caleb Maupin. That's where I'm at. I'll pull up the link here at Real Caleb Maupin. You know, there's some fake accounts. They're harassing me and, you know, doing what they always do, you know, but I'm at Real Caleb Maupin on Twitter. I'll drop that in the chat. Real Caleb Maupin. You can go follow me there and keep up with what our community is doing. So there we go. And yeah, we're just going to keep going. So there you go. So I wanted to talk about a couple things here on the stream today. First of all, somebody asked about Tulsi Gabbard last night. And we're going to show a clip of Tulsi Gabbard later. But I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about, I wanted to talk about this one for a while. I may have mentioned it before, but it's worth mentioning. This book, The God That Failed. I don't know if people have ever heard of this. The God That Failed. This is one of the most famous CIA, Congress for Cultural Freedom, anti-communist screeds ever published. Very famous anti-communist collection of essays. The God That Failed. And it is essays by former communists about how they stopped being communists. And it's CIA propaganda. I mean, it was the CIA that put this book out. I believe it was originally published in 1949. 1949, actually, is when it was first published. Arthur Kessler, Richard Wright, Ignazio Siloni, Louis Fisher, Stephen Spender. It's anti-communist essays by people who had been in the Communist Party of the United States, the Communist Party of Germany, and quit. And the CIA assembled this essay, but the name of it is really important. The God That Failed. Because this is what you have to understand. Communism is not God. Marxism, dialectical and historical materialism. Oh, very good point. Writing it down. Very good question, John. This is a method for understanding the world, understanding the objective laws of history, contradiction, the dialectic. There's always a thesis, and that thesis is confronted with an antithesis. That antithesis then becomes a synthesis. It clashes with the thesis and you get a synthesis. That the synthesis becomes a new thesis. That history is driven forward by contradiction. That the economic foundations of society, the economic base guides the superstructure. These are all important things to understand. Marxism is a method for understanding history. Scientific socialism, etc. But it is not God, and it is not flawless. And honestly, I mean, you all know that in some ways, I am not a true adherent of Marxism. Marxism is hard materialism. It says all that exists in the universe is matter. Thought is inseparable from matter that thinks. I don't think that. I believe that there is a spiritual quality to humanity. I believe in God. So I'm not a true Marxist in that sense, right? I mean, I am an advocate of socialism. I do use historical and dialectical materialism to understand history. I'm a defender of socialism as it exists in the world. I interpret history through a historical materialist lens. But even this guy who's streaming on here with 1 million books behind him, even I tell you that Marxism has flaws. Marxism is a useful tool. It's a useful tool for understanding history, but it's not infallible. And if you think Marxism is infallible, this is where you're going to end up. And this is the important thing to understand. The God that failed. And this is really important in light of what happened in our community. Because I told you all many times on these broadcasts, people watch these streams, you'll remember it. I said over and over and over again, folks, there will come a time where I will let you down. There will come a time where I do something or say something that you disagree with. It's going to happen. And I warned you that there would be a time where I would disappoint you, where I would fail you. I never claimed to be a prophet. I never claimed to be a Messiah. I never claimed to be infallible. And I warned you all that there would come a time where I let you down. And it happened. And we dealt with it as a community, and we've moved on. But there were some people. There were some people who couldn't move on. There were some people who, the God that failed. 1956, the Khrushchev revelations. 1956. You have to remember how, this book came out in 1949 in the middle of McCarthyism. The CIA, they got Richard Wright, a very famous African-American writer who had been a communist. They got Arthur Kessler, a very famous German writer who'd been a communist. They got some others, and they published this essay. But 7 years later, after the death of Stalin, a couple years after Stalin died, they had the 20th Party Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And Khrushchev, the leader of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the new leader after the 20th Party Congress, he got up on the stand and he took the floor at the podium of the 20th Party Congress and he threw Stalin under the bus. He went on an anti-Stalin tirade. They call it the secret speech. The secret speech. And it was so secret, they published it in the New York Times a couple days later. So it wasn't really secret. But he used the platform of the 20th Party Congress to give a tirade against Stalin. And the secret speech devastated the international communist movement. It caused a disaster in the American Communist Party. It caused a disaster in the French Communist Party. It was a devastating blow, especially in the United States, because in the United States, in the European countries, they weren't as hard on the communists. But in America, during the McCarthy period, the Communist Party members were rounded up and arrested. They had the Smith Act trials. They passed the McCarran Internal Security Act, a law that actually created concentration camps in a potential national emergency. Why do you think Khrushchev did the secret speech? All right. If you were a communist, the FBI would prevent you from working. I mean, I've talked to older communists who lived through this period. They talked about how, the FBI, there was a woman who was a teacher. There was an old woman who'd been in the Workers' World Party. She was in the Workers' World Party and an older lady. When I first joined the party, they drove me up to Buffalo and I sat in the living room of this woman well over 80 who was a communist, had been in the Workers' World Party, the Socialist Workers' Party in the 1950s. She'd been a teacher. The FBI showed up at her job. She got fired, They had a protest. They had a protest when the steel mill in Buffalo laid off and fired all the workers that were members of the Communist Party. They had a protest outside the plant. The next day, the Buffalo newspaper printed the names and addresses of every single person who had gone to the protest. Cancel culture, just classic cancel culture. It doxed all of them, to use modern day terminology. The FBI showed up at her job. She lost her job. I mean, this was the atmosphere. And so these folks who stayed in the Communist Party amid McCarthyism, the House Un-American Activities Committee, FBI raids and harassment, there was a group of people, most members of the Communist Party quit. During the Browder years, the Communist Party had allowed a lot of very middle-class people to join, right? Earl Browder had loosened the rules of party membership. There were a lot of very middle-class college professors and actors, Hollywood actors, and people that didn't quite really believe in communism were in the Communist Party because it was hip and trendy. It was hip and trendy because Roosevelt was president. Roosevelt aligned with the Communist Party. So, being a communist is a radical stand to take, but if the president of the United States is kind of in an alliance with you, it's not as radical. And there were a lot of people who joined the Communist Party during these years, during the 1940s, when it was a hip, cool thing to do, when it was trendy. And as soon as the McCarthyism stuff started, they were out of there. They're like, oh shit, I don't want to get caught in this. I don't want to get caught up in this. Get me out of here. A lot of them. A lot of famous writers. John Steinbeck had been, the author of The Grapes of Wrath. He'd been like an ally of the Communist Party. He started making anti-communist comments. A lot of famous people that had been allies of the Communist Party. Oh my God, it wasn't cool. It wasn't trendy anymore. And they were out of there, And honestly, this is why on some level I recognize that not everyone should be a communist, because I see stuff like that today. That's what goes on with the cancel culture, right? Oh, someone's getting attacked on Twitter, right? Oh, time to throw them under the bus. Time to, there's certain people that just have no bravery, no spine, no principles. They're around when it's trendy and hip, and then they're out of there. And, you can't work with people like that. People that will, that's a whole nother story. But, we see a similar parallel today. But there was a core of people, about six to 10,000 people, which is, in an organization where that's people that are very dedicated and giving the whole of their lives, 6 to 10,000 people is quite substantial. There were about 6 to 10,000 people in the Communist Party USA that dug their heels in. And they said, nope, we're not going to surrender to McCarthyism. We're not going to go along with this. We are in this for real. And they stayed loyal party members throughout the McCarthy period. When the FBI was knocking on their door every night, and when all their relatives were getting threatened, when they couldn't keep a job, when they just made their lives as miserable as possible, and a lot of them went to prison. Gus Hall went to prison. Henry Winston went to prison. They blinded Henry Winston. I don't know if you know this. Henry Winston was held in prison. He wasn't given proper food, and he ended up losing his eyesight in prison. Henry Winston. I went to his grave in Chicago. On his grave, it says, "They took my sight, but not my vision." It's a powerful, powerful thing. During the McCarthy period, they went after the Communist Party, but there was 6 to 10,000 people who were like, we will not surrender. They went to prison. They dealt with endless harassment, and they said, nope, we believe in communism. We ain't going anywhere. And then in 1956, Khrushchev got up and gave the secret speech. And that devastated these people, because that secret speech that Khrushchev gave was Khrushchev saying, oh, all the stuff the U.S. media said about Stalin, that's all true. And to have the leader of the Soviet Union attack Stalin in the same terms that the Western media attacked Stalin, calling him a tyrant, saying he suppressed the political opposition, that he was this mass murdering dictator and all of this, to have that happen, devastated, demoralized the communists like you wouldn't believe, because this was the leader of the Soviet Union, of the leading socialist country. He made these statements. He made these statements, and it devastated them, because they had been insisting, no, it's all lies. But the problem was that the Soviet Union clearly had problems. Khrushchev, having come to power after the death of Stalin and coming in and making these comments, showed that the Soviet Union had problems. Right? A lot of what Khrushchev said in the secret speech was bullshit, and it's been debunked. Dr. Grover Furr has a great book called Khrushchev Lied. Some of the stuff in the secret speech is ridiculous. They claim that Stalin was so afraid when Hitler invaded that he hid under his desk crying. That's ridiculous. Stalin was a bank robber. He used to walk into banks and point guns in people's faces and rob them. So the idea that, he heard about an army thousands of miles away and he hid under his desk crying, and, that Stalin, Stalin had been preparing the Soviet Union for a Nazi invasion for decades. He knew it was coming, right? There's a book by Anna Louise Strong called The Soviets Expected It. So the secret speech, a lot of what Khrushchev said was bullshit. But the fact that he became the leader of the Soviet Union, that he could make these statements, and the fact that there had been so many people in the Soviet Communist Party during the 1930s that had been arrested and charged and sent to prison or executed during what they call the Yezhovshchina, or the Great Terror, that an atmosphere of panic and widespread fear existed in the USSR in 1936 and 1937. And people were turning in their neighbors, and all kinds of people were accusing other people of being, secretly spies. And they call it the Yezhovshchina. Yezhov was the leader of the secret police, who was basically using the atmosphere of fear following the assassination of Sergei Kirov He was using it more or less to create, to carry out a political operation. He wasn't really protecting security. And eventually Stalin executed Yezhov. But the fact that you had that great terror episode where people were being dragged away in the middle of the night and everyone was afraid that everybody else was a Nazi. And, the fact that you had such an atmosphere and such problems, the Soviet Union wasn't heaven on earth. The Soviet Union did amazing things, raised millions of people out of poverty. It industrialized a huge swath of the world that had never been industrialized. It wiped out illiteracy. It built modern universities. It invented space travel. It invented the AK-47 rifle. I mean, it defeated the Nazis, for Christ's sakes. I mean, millions of people in the Soviet Union that had never had access to healthcare before. And it was because of Stalin and the 5-year economic plans. They saw a doctor for the first time in their lives. The Soviet Union was electrified, right? That whole region of the world had never had electricity. And it was socialist economic planning that built them up. They had the biggest steel industry in the world. They had the biggest hydroelectrical power plants in the world. If you look at what they were doing in ballet and the arts, right? I mean, the movies, Sergei Eisenstein was, the father of the montage. They were making some of the best movies in the world. And the Soviet Union had astounding achievements. And Stalin was very charismatic, and he had this ability to mobilize the population to get shit done, right? He understood. He took the ideas of the Bolsheviks, of Lenin and the radical Bolsheviks, and he found a way to apply it to a population that was deeply conservative, right? Stalin was a synthesis in a lot of ways, right? You had deeply conservative semi-feudal Russia, right? That had the czarist autocracy, where the czar, the king basically is not just the king, he's also the pope, right? He's the head of the church. You had a huge peasantry. You had deep religious, conservative, patriarchal, mystical, feudal traditions that were deeply embedded in the population. And then you had these very radical people called the Bolsheviks, right? Lenin and Trotsky and what is their name? Alexandra Kollontai and Litvinov and these people were very middle class and radical and into free love and the most radical extreme. They were the most far left people you could ever find. And Stalin was a synthesis. He could take the radical theories of the Bolsheviks, the Marxist understanding of socialist economics, etc., but apply it in a way that a deeply conservative population would accept. And Stalin was brilliant in that way. I mean, what Stalin was able to do, what Stalin really pioneered, what they call really existing socialism, the socialism that emerged in the 20th century, really existing socialism. That wasn't the socialism of Karl Marx. It wasn't the socialism of Karl Marx exactly. It had a conservative edge to it, but it worked and it raised a whole country up. And then China developed that model even further, and Eastern European countries and a lot of African countries and Cuba and North Korea. And what Stalin figured out, the really existing socialism of the 20th century, that was Stalin, and it was brilliant and it worked. And it was a break with Western radicalism and the revolutionary intelligentsia. Trotsky hated it, right? Trotsky couldn't stand it. He wanted permanent revolution and chaos and destruction. But what Stalin did was very innovative. And the impact of it was overwhelmingly positive. I mean, I'm sorry, but millions of people lifted out of poverty, illiteracy wiped out, huge swaths of the world, that are industrialized, the life expectancy almost doubling. I mean, it's astounding what Stalin did. And it was a breakthrough. If Stalin had just repeated what Lenin and Trotsky and all of them were doing, it wouldn't have worked. They would have just had chaos. Stalin had to figure out how to be the synthesis. And Stalin himself was a synthesis. This is actually fascinating. But Stalin was like in the middle. In the Bolshevik Party, you had two types of people. You had your middle class radicals, right? Your rich kids who went to the university and started reading and were mad about the czarist autocracy and started reading about Marxism and revolutionary ideas and all of that. And they tended to be middle class and wealthy. And then you had workers, factory workers, people who joined labor unions and were factory workers, because that was what the Bolsheviks did, is they organized labor unions. And so you had labor union members that were the rank and file, and then you had these middle-class intellectuals who were at the top making the decisions. Stalin was neither of those things. He was both of those things, and he was neither of those things. Stalin was not from a wealthy family. He wasn't even from Russia. He was from Georgia, which was an oppressed nation within the Russian Empire. And he was from Georgia, but he was literate. He had been to seminary school. He could read and write. And so on the one hand, Stalin was from the people. He was from the people, from the workers. On the other hand, he could read and write. He was literate. He'd studied in the revolutionary reading groups. He'd organized secret Marxist study groups at his seminary school. So he was both of those things. He had a foot in both worlds, in the revolutionary intelligentsia and among the labor and the broad masses of people. Stalin had been a labor organizer, but Stalin had also been, a reader of revolutionary books and revolutionary organizer. He taught Marxist classes. Stalin had a foot in both camps. And it was amazing what Stalin was able to do. He was able to, in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution, when you have the Bolsheviks, this very radical middle-class party that leads labor unions taking power, and then you have a huge peasantry that, that is very conservative. Stalin innovated, and he developed a model that was very, very effective, but it wasn't perfect. Political repression, horrendous political repression, in a lot of ways, a lot of artists and intellectuals felt stifled. There were problems in the Soviet Union. It wasn't heaven on earth. But a lot of leftists approached it as if it was heaven on earth, right? Because the propaganda against it from the West was so overwhelming. And it still is. They say, oh, Soviet Union never achieved anything. It's like, how do you look at a whole society rising up from poverty, and how do you say it never achieved anything? The propaganda against it was so overwhelming. So overwhelming that people saw the truth of their achievements, and they said, all right, it's black or white. And that is how you set the stage for the God that failed. When things are black or white, when people are good or evil, there's no in between. Someone can't be flawed. Someone can't be, possibly making mistakes. Right? When people just have this view of there's good people and there's bad people, they get easily manipulated. I mean, that's just how these things work. When people have a light switch view of the world, where it's either good or bad, they get easily manipulated, because nothing in the world is that simple. There is huge amounts of nuance in the world. Great example of this. Someone who will not be named. Well, I'll get to that in a minute, but Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe was the prime minister of Japan. He was not a good dude. He was anti-China, pro-imperialist, right-wing, hated North Korea, supported U.S. imperialism and its threats. Shinzo Abe was a bad dude. I was not a Shinzo Abe supporter. Never was. If you look at the role of right-wing nationalism, right-wing populism, the Liberal Democratic Party in Japan, not good. But why did they kill Shinzo Abe? Why was Shinzo Abe killed? Well, it's very obvious why Shinzo Abe was killed. Because he, for whatever reason, was more sympathetic to Russia. And at the time of his assassination, all over the internet, many people said that. Oh, wow, here's the one leader of a Western capitalist country. It's not actually a Western capitalist country, but it's an imperialist country, Japan. He was a leader of an imperialist country, and it was Russiagate, right? He said, just like Trump, he was saying, maybe Russia shouldn't be the focus. We should focus on fighting China. He wasn't fully on board with the anti-Russia stuff. He just wasn't fully on board. And the Ukraine thing, he was just like, and Putin and Shinzo Abe had a friendship, and right as the Ukraine stuff started, he got assassinated. And a lot of people looked at this and said, okay, now Shinzo Abe may not be the best guy. Shinzo Abe may not, be somebody we agree with, but it looks like his assassination is coming from a bad place. It looks like he was offed because of the fact that he was not on board with the anti-Russia crusade, just like they're going after Republicans in the United States, right? Just like they're going after conservatives right now, just like they did Russiagate against Trump, right? Just because somebody is attacked for a bad reason and attacked by the forces of evil doesn't mean that they then become all good. It's not a light switch. But there's this idiot who used to be associated with me, who after Shinzo Abe was killed, he gets on there with his big eyes. And he's just like, he's bad. He's bad. It's like, of course he's bad. No one's saying Shinzo Abe was good, you dumb fuck. No one's saying Shinzo Abe was good, but it's obvious that his assassination was coming from a bad place. No, he's bad. It's like, this person, it's like, if that's your analysis, I swear, this is how dumb these people are. There's good people and there's bad people. John, great example. When the movie JFK came out, great movie, by the way, great movie. Oliver Stone, classic Hollywood movie about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Great movie. When that movie came out, Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn denounced the movie. Did you know that? Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky, the two big leftist intellectuals in the United States, they came out against Oliver Stone. You know why? Well, Kennedy's bad. I mean, Kennedy did the Bay of Pigs invasion. Kennedy was not really supporting the civil rights movement enough. And so Kennedy's bad. Well, yeah, Kennedy was bad in a lot of ways. Sure. Yeah, Kennedy wasn't a socialist, wasn't a communist. He was the commander-in-chief of U.S. imperialism. But there were clearly differences among the imperialists when it came to Vietnam, when it came to, whether they were going to follow up the Bay of Pigs invasion with a military intervention in Cuba. There were differences about how to relate to the civil rights movement. Should they just totally suppress it, or should they kind of use it for their own end? There were differences in the ruling class, for Christ's sakes. No, Kennedy was not a messiah. No, Kennedy was not a revolutionary or a socialist. Kennedy was a leader of the United States, but he was killed by forces that were coming from a bad place, that wanted more. They wanted to escalate the Vietnam War. They wanted him to be more aggressive. Kennedy was getting in with that more Eastern establishment faction. He wanted to fight the communists with the Peace Corps and covert CIA operations and proxies and coups. He didn't want to escalate in Vietnam. He thought the civil rights movement was necessary to kind of, bring society together and prevent the communists from using the race issue to escalate class struggle and whatever, right? He was pretending he was somewhat sympathetic to the civil rights movement. He wasn't excited about going into Vietnam. He didn't follow up the Bay of Pigs invasion with a straight up U.S. military intervention. And so he was removed. And Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot him, I mean, look into it, right? Look into it, right? I mean, it's pretty clear that the assassination of Kennedy came from a pretty bad place. And it wasn't just, one guy acted alone. And, we can go into the details of it was pretty clear that, no, it wasn't just, Lee Harvey Oswald had a psychotic break, that there was a section of the U.S. ruling class who didn't like him, who thought he was a traitor, who thought he was soft on the commies. The military-industrial complex removed Kennedy. I mean, they did. It was a military firing squad, basically, is what happened. That the military-industrial complex that was very powerful, that Dwight Eisenhower had warned the U.S. public about, the military manufacturers, the far right wing, the John Birch Society, those kind of people, they saw Kennedy as a traitor, as a commie. He didn't want to escalate in Vietnam. He was going to cut into their war profits. He was, pushing the civil rights movement, which they thought was a communist conspiracy against the white race or some bullshit. He was using the civil rights movement. They feared that because he was backing a mass movement in the streets, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? They remembered Roosevelt. Roosevelt had been president during the 1930s, and he had backed the labor movement and supported the sit-down strike wave. And there were a lot of capitalists and a lot of military people and manufacturers that said he's too soft on the commies. He likes the civil rights protesters. He doesn't want to escalate in Vietnam, and that Kennedy was ousted and removed. And does Kennedy have to be good? Does that mean that? And how is that an argument? When Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn came out and said, "Oh, well, no, this movie JFK, you can't make this movie because Kennedy was bad." Of course, Kennedy was bad, but the people who killed him were worse. There are divisions in the ruling class. There is nuance in the world. There's nuance in the world. These things are not simple. Back to Shinzo Abe. What was going on there with Shinzo Abe? Who killed Shinzo Abe? The guy who shot Shinzo Abe, let me add, first of all, Japan has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world. In Japan, you cannot get a gun. Like police don't carry guns on streets. But this guy made his own gun. He made a homemade firearm. Not an easy thing to do. He made his own gun. And this homemade gun that he made had 2 barrels on it, and he managed to get 2 shots out of a homemade gun. Holy crap. Do you think that's just something average people do? Average lunatic has a psychotic meltdown, so he makes a homemade. No, that's the work of professionals. That is a hit by a professional assassin, my friends. On top of that, what was the reason that this guy gave for killing Shinzo Abe? Well, this guy is a former member of the Unification Church, and his mother is a member of the Unification Church, and he got in with the deprogrammers and Steve Hassan and all the people who hate the Unification Church. And those folks, Steve Hassan is completely tied in with U.S. intelligence. You talk about Robert J. Lifton, the U.S. Air Force psychiatrist who came up with the theory of totalism and brainwashing. And it's like he got tied in with the Steve Hassan anti-Mooney network, anti-Unification Church network. He got tied in with them. That's a heavily intelligence operated wing of things, right? This is a group that they went around kidnapping people at one point. They would drag people off the streets and hold them hostage in rooms and like browbeat them in order to change their religious beliefs. These are, how do you not go to prison for that? This is an intelligence operation. The anti-Mooney, anti-Unification Church network is like, it's about as connected to the deep state as you can get. I mean, when you can kidnap people and lock them in rooms and browbeat them and not go to jail for it, I mean, that's ridiculous. Read about the Cult Awareness Network. I've talked about all of this, right? And that's why they're advising BreadTube today. This isn't, this deprogramming stuff. This is an intelligence thing. This comes from, the CIA, MK Ultra research and all of that. And this guy was part of these networks. He managed to, to make a firearm that was homemade, that he got 2 shots out of. And on top of that, what has happened in Japan since the assassination of Shinzo Abe? You would think that if a former prime minister who is widely loved is killed because of his affinity to a religious group, there would be mass sympathy for that religious group, wouldn't there? I mean, if a president or a popular figure in the United States had been killed and then the shooter said it was because they were friends of Buddhists, There would be a widespread sympathy for Buddhists. People would be going to Buddhist temples and saying, we will not stand for religious violence. You know, if somebody was killed in the United States, if a prominent politician was killed because they were friendly to Muslims, you can bet that people at all, America would be, saying we should have no hatred for Muslims. They would be sympathetic to Muslims. That's not what's happening in Japan right now. In Japan, it seems like the mainstream of society is joining with the assassin. And they're saying, yeah, this shows that we got to purge the Unification Church. And they have a hysterical campaign now against the Unification Church. What sense does that make? Right? It's almost like the public is being mobilized to support the assassin. That, again, shows that if this assassination were just a random thing, there would be widespread sympathy for the Unification Church. But no. Instead, there's widespread sympathy for the cause of the assassin, which is hating the Unification Church. Which shows, again, that the power structure probably had something to do with this. That doesn't make Shinzo Abe good. That doesn't make Shinzo Abe good. But it shows that there are divisions. Nuance. Everything is not black and white. There's not good people and bad people. There are people that do good things. There are people that do bad things. The world is a very, very, very complicated place. The world is very complicated. The world is extremely complicated. Not everything is straightforward and simple. And if you view things that way, if you view things from the mindset that some people are all good and some people are all bad, you're going to end up with the guy that failed. Eventually, you will be let down. If you build people up to be infallible, eventually you're going to find out they ain't. And that's going to lead to a place of demoralization. And you're not going to be able to continue to do political work. You have to approach things in a mature way. I've been to Iran many times. I think the Islamic Republic of Iran is a force for good in the world. They have raised people out of poverty. They are supporting the Palestinians in their fight against Zionism. They are allies of Venezuela and Bolivia and Russia and China. They have largely socialist economics in their country, but they have problems too. I mean, it's, in terms of human rights, there's issues. And when I go there, they're the first people to tell me that. And I'm in Iran. They say, yes, we have problems with human rights. We have areas we need to improve on. And there are differences within the Islamic Republic of Iran about it. And when I went to Iran, I didn't expect to see a socialist paradise. I didn't expect to see an amazing country with no flaws. I saw a country that is a force for good. The Islamic Republic has been largely good for the country. But it has flaws. Venezuela, same thing. I was there in 2015. In Venezuela, I mean, they built new universities. They wiped out illiteracy. They've done amazing things. There's whole neighborhoods that have been built where, the people used to live in shacks. And now, thanks to the socialist government, they all have modern houses with free heat and free running water. I mean, it's amazing. But do they have problems in Venezuela? Yes, they do. With corruption, with the fact that their economy is centered around oil, a one commodity economy, and that enabled the USA to just manipulate them. You have to see things in terms of nuance. And that's why we have to, this applies to so many things. It applies to me, right? I told you all I would let you down. I'm not perfect. I made mistakes. And I was honest with you about it. And some people said, see ya, and good. Good, because if you're going to leave over this, we don't need you, good riddance. Better, fewer, but better. I'm done chasing after people. You want to be part of this community and help me do the work that needs to be done to stop the wars and preach Marxism, great. Glad to have you. But if you can't be around because I'm flawed, good riddance. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. I'm done chasing after people. I've got a job to do, and I'm going to do it well. And if you're going to get in my way, or if you're going to be jealous, or if you're going to be, if you're more committed to being a loser or whatever, again, You can work with me or you can not work with me. I'm done chasing after people. So it applies to me, but it applies to a lot of other things. It also applies to the international situation. Like I said, Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, these countries are flawed, but are they good compared to the imperialists? Yes. Are they the force for good in the world against the global capitalist system of imperialism? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. But if you build them up to be infallible, you're going to be disappointed because there are big problems in every anti-imperialist and socialist country. There are big problems. There are big problems. And if you believe these countries are infallible, if you believe these countries are heaven on earth, just wait till the Khrushchev revelations happen. Just wait till the Khrushchev revelations happen, and you're going to be disappointed. If you can't align yourself with anything that's flawed, you're going to be very disappointed. And right now, that's really important for those of us who are Marxists in the United States to understand. Because right now, if you really believe in socialism, if you really believe that we should have a society where the banks and the factories and the major centers of economic power are controlled by the people, if you really believe that we've got to stop these ugly wars, if you really believe that this international capitalist system, this global financial system of imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage has to be gotten rid of, if you really believe that the working people of the United States should make their voices heard and stand up, if you really believe that we've got to stand up to state repression, the FBI and the Pentagon, if you really believe that we should have the right to have streams like this where we talk about these things, if you really believe that, you cannot align with the synthetic left, and you've got to align with some people that it's going to be difficult to align with. There is a faction, there are divisions in the ruling class right now. And there is one faction in the ruling class that are straight up fascists. And they are led by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And they want World War III, and they want to drive living standards down. They want to depopulate the country. They want to set up a low-wage police state. They want permanent cancel culture. They want, unrestricted rule by the ultra monopolies. And you got to oppose them. And that means, yes, you got to be friends with a lot of people who don't see eye to eye with us about a lot of things. And that brings me to somebody that I've long admired. I've met her before. I had the honor of meeting her. Tulsi Gabbard, a great woman, was in the Democratic Party, a voice, an anti-war voice, ran for president. Now she has left the Democratic Party. And this is an old video, but I'm going to play her video about why she left the Democratic Party, and we're going to talk about it.
No longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism.
Now, would I use that terminology, anti-white racism? No. I mean, I view racism, what white people, resentment that people of color might have against white people. I would never use that phrase, anti-white racism. But I know what she means. That the focus of the woke left is not on actually trying to raise people up. It's about punishing people for their perceived privilege, guilt, etc. I'm open to it. Send me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com, Burton. I'm open to it. Send me your stuff. I'm open to it. I wouldn't use that phrase anti-white racism. I view racism in terms of, history of oppression, etc. So I wouldn't use that term. But I know what she's referring to. She's referring to how the woke politics isn't about building solidarity to lift up the oppressed. Woke politics is about punishing people, accusing people of having too good lives, being privileged. It's about, great example, Occupy Wall Street. I was at Occupy Wall Street, right? And it was a protest against, the 1%, against the capitalist ruling class, the elite, right? And it was about the bailout, how they got bailed out while the American people got sold out. And it was great. And during Occupy Wall Street, there were a number of people who said, well, Occupy Wall Street, if black people, if they were white, and it was largely a white protest. There were plenty of people of color there, but it was very largely white. There were a lot of people, there were people who didn't like Occupy Wall Street. And they said, oh, if a group of black people had gone down to Wall Street, they would have all been arrested on the first day. That's true. And that shows that it's unfair. But should we not have done it? I mean, do you want the police to arrest us on the first day too? Is that what we want? We want a state that oppresses everyone? That's like a dumb way of looking at it. It's like, you're right. Yes, the government is much harder on people of color. The police state is much harder on people of color. But does that mean that, is that what anti-racists want? Is they want the government to be hard on everyone? Right? They do studies where it's like, statistically white people make more money on the job for doing the same job than black people. That's awful. But shouldn't the goal be to raise up black people so they get the wages too? Or is it to make white people poorer to like get revenge? Right? Well, no, the idea should be to raise up people of color so they're not getting less. So there's more equality, right? That's not what these wokes want. No, they want to tear down the white people. It's weird. They again, it's that same wrecker mentality. Well, I've suffered, so I want somebody else to suffer too. No, you shouldn't have suffered. And other people shouldn't be suffering. That's the correct approach. That's the optimistic, moral approach, is to say, if something bad has happened to me, I deserve justice for it. And I want to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else. If something bad happens to you, your approach shouldn't be to go around saying, oh, well, something bad happened to me, so I want it to happen to somebody else. No, your approach should be, generally, if something bad happens to you, you should want justice for it. You should want some kind of, recognition, some kind of consolation. But then you should also want whatever bad thing happened to you to not happen to somebody else. Right? I mean, it doesn't help you in any way. If something bad happens to you, and then whatever bad happened to you happened to somebody else, that doesn't benefit you in any way. If a woman gets raped, right, a horrendous, evil thing happens, does it help her in any way if somebody else gets raped? No, of course not. You get robbed on the street. If you're walking down the street and somebody mugs you at gunpoint and steals your wallet, does it help you in any way if somebody else then gets robbed on the street and mugged? Of course not. But that's how wreckers think. That's how losers think. As they get into this mindset of like, yeah, well, my life sucks, but somebody else's life can suck too. That's a loser mindset. If you want to be a loser, if you want to be depressed, you want to be hopeless, that's the way to start thinking. If you get into the mindset of something bad happened to me, rather than trying to prevent it from happening, rather than trying to get retribution for what happened to me, instead, I'm just going to focus on making sure something bad happens to someone else also. You are going to be a miserable person. That just leads to a cycle of resentment and pain and misery, and you are going to be a miserable person. That is an awful way to live, and that's the way the synthetic left operates, and that's what Tulsi Gabbard is talking about here. So yes, she uses language I wouldn't use, but what she's referring to is the fact that the synthetic left has a wrecker mentality. It's not about empowering people of color. It's about tearing down white people, to get revenge or something, and it's not helping the country. So I'm with her on that. Continue, Tulsi.
Who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people.
She's right about that too. They want to ban free speech on Twitter. They want to ban free speech on social media. They want to silence Julian Assange because he dared exercise his freedom of the press. They want to extradite him here and torture him. And if you dare stick up for Julian Assange, they'll cancel you. Oh yeah. I mean, they are against freedom of speech. They are against freedom of assembly. They've got new laws after January 6th banning protests. And yes, these folks, they want an all-out fascist state where if the government decides your message is fascist or racist, you're not allowed to have a protest. That's what they want. That is what they want. And yeah, if you're a leftist, you should be against them.
Faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals.
Let me go back to what she said before. I don't think you heard it.
Who demonize the Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police.
Yes, hostile to people of faith and spirituality. Absolutely. You know, these people, the synthetic left, they think that if you believe in God, you're an idiot. They think if you believe, right and wrong exists, you're an idiot. And they think that if you believe there's anything worth living for, if there's any higher purpose worth struggling for, you're stupid. Thought Slime, one of the prominent bread tubers, he said on one of his streams, he said, no one over the age of 7 believes in good and evil. That's what he said. No one over the age of 7 believes in good and evil. I beg to differ, Thought Slime. I believe in good and evil, and I am 34 years old. Good and evil exist. I have seen evil. I have looked evil in the face, and I have seen good. And yes, there's nuance in the world. Not very much in this world is pure good or pure evil. But yes, good and evil do exist, but not according to the synthetic left. No, according to the synthetic left, anyone who believes in anything, anyone who wants to fight for a cause is just a sucker. It's all a cult. It's all brainwashing. It's all mind control. It's all propaganda. There's no hope. There's no truth. The God that failed, go stay at home and be miserable. Well, Tulsi Gabbard says no. She is a Hindu. That is her religious background. I'm a Christian. And there are Muslims who believe in right and wrong. There are Jews who believe in right and wrong, but according to the synthetic left, according to the Biden, Kamala Harris cult, according to them, we're all a bunch of suckers. And if you believe in right and wrong, I'm with you, Tulsi. Continue.
But protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans who believe in open borders, who...
Yeah, right. Now, at this point, defund the police, police brutality, big problem. But the crime rates are rising. Working people aren't happy. People are afraid to go on the subways in New York. She's got a point. And this crisis of mass migration isn't good either. I don't want to blame the immigrant workers. They're not the enemy. But the crisis of mass migration isn't good. It's not something to celebrate. The fact that people can't live in their homes, people are piling onto the U.S. border, the fact that they find dead bodies along the border every day of people trying to flee, that conditions are that bad thanks to neoliberalism and free market policies imposed in Guatemala and Honduras and Central America, that people are fleeing their homes. That's not a good situation. Not a good situation at all. But liberals think it's great. It's the American dream. Hey, and if you have a problem with it, you're racist. No, the problem isn't the immigrant workers. We shouldn't, and that suppressing immigrants only makes the situation worse, right? The more you make immigrant communities afraid to call the police, the more that MS-13 and criminal gangs, have a place to hide. The more that employers are able to exploit immigrant workers, that's one thing when they talk about immigrants, get paid less. Yeah. And the more you make them afraid, the more you push them into the shadows, the more their employers are able to exploit them. When immigrant workers are unafraid, they can go to their boss and they say, it's the law. You have to pay me minimum wage. But if they're terrified of being deported, if there's ICE raids going on, they're not going to say anything. And that's how the employers can get away with paying them not much. The more you attack the immigrants, the worse the problems of immigration become. The more you make them afraid to call the police, the more welcome and influential and powerful the criminal organizations become. The more that you suppress them, the more employers can get away with not paying them, etc. So, we shouldn't demonize the immigrant workers. We should. I am for legalization of the undocumented. But at the same time, the idea that the situation is good, that we should just celebrate it, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Open borders is not a real policy. Every country in the world has a border, right? Even if you let every person come in, you're still going to have customs where they're going to show their passport. Open borders is not a real policy, right? And the fact that there are people actually talking about, yeah, we just want complete open borders. Are you stupid? I'm sorry. You got to at least have a customs thing for them to walk through and stamp their passport with. That's not a real policy. It's just chaos, right? It's just, yeah, I want to open the border. I'm so radical. No, it's not a real policy, right? Yes. Stop the attacks on immigrant workers. Yes. Stop the raids and deportations. Out of the shadows for the immigrant community. Full legalization of the undocumented. But we can acknowledge, number one, that the crisis of mass migration is not good. And number two, we can recognize that we're going to, even if we had a socialist government in America, would we have a border? Yes.
Weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents.
Yep.
And above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war.
Yep. Both of those things, right? They have been using the federal government to go after their political rivals, right? Look what they did to the African People's Socialist Party. This is a group, the Uhuru Movement, that we hosted at our Center for Political Innovation conference, a revolutionary Black organization that is pro-Russia. And what did they do? What did they do to the Uhuru Movement? They raided their homes, pointed guns in their faces, terrorized them. It was horrendous. Why? Because they got some donations from Russia or something. Horrendous, right? And they've viciously gone after some anti-abortion protesters. Now, I'm personally pro-choice, but I know what's going on here. When the federal government and the FBI is terrorizing anti-abortion protesters, I know what's going on here, right? This is that they are weaponizing the security state. In the aftermath of January 6th, they got all kinds of repressive laws, going after Julian Assange, torturing Julian Assange. They are weaponizing the national security state. They're moving toward a fascist state, a green rainbow flag fascism. That's what they're moving toward, and we have to oppose it, right? And that's why Tulsi Gabbard left the Democratic Party. And they're moving us closer to World War III. The squad said they wanted Biden to negotiate. The most lame, mild statement about Ukraine. The most lame, mild statement about Ukraine from Biden. And the squad had to retract it and apologize. Can you believe this? They had to retract and apologize. It wasn't even a radical statement. They didn't point out that this war was actually started by the U.S. government overthrowing the Ukrainian government in 2014. They didn't point out that the people of the Donbass regions voted overwhelmingly to join with Russia. They first voted for independence, then Russia recognized them, then they voted to join with Russia. They didn't point out the Ukrainian government is suppressing their language, has been bombing them. They didn't point out any of that. All they said was, hey, Biden, you better negotiate. You ought to negotiate something. And what happened? What happened because they said that? They had to apologize. They had to come out and be like, we're sorry, don't negotiate. We're so sorry. They retracted their statement. This is insanity. You're not even allowed to say negotiate in the Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is so committed to escalating tension, to piling weapons into Ukraine, to drive up that oil price and make money for ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron, to try and attack Russia and drive Russia off the market because they're a competitor, because they sell their own oil and gas. They are so desperate to keep this war going, to escalate tensions, to keep death happening in Ukraine, that even the squad, they just tried to in response to the fact that people were heckling them, people from the LaRouche movement and others were heckling them and calling them out for this, they wrote the most mild statement. Maybe you want to negotiate. And then they said, no, you will not. And they said, oh, sorry, sir. Yes. Oh, no, please. We want war. We want war. No negotiations. I mean, it's pathetic. You are not allowed to oppose World War III in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the party of World War III. They are the party of escalating international tensions. And if you want peace, you ain't allowed in the Democratic Party.
Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not.
Yeah. It's interesting. That comes from Abraham Lincoln, right? That was in the Gettysburg Address. Abraham Lincoln said that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. And when I will never forget when I went to an event with the foreign minister of Venezuela, and he was speaking, and he said, Abraham Lincoln said, government by the people, of the people, and for the people. We consider this to be a socialist statement, and we support it. Pretty basic, right? Abraham Lincoln was not a socialist, but the concept of having a government of the people, a government of action that fights for working families, a government that represents the broad masses, a government for the millions and not the millionaires, right? A government of the working class. That is a socialist concept, and it's in our culture, and we should embrace it, right? But anyway, we'll talk more about Lincoln later.
Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite.
Yep. The Silicon Valley fascists, the big monopolies, the oil bankers, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the DuPonts, Gates, the World Economic Forum, the technocratic ultra monopolists. That's who they're for. That is who they are for. And those folks have decided we're not allowed to be religious anymore and believe in God. Those folks have decided that we're going to war with Russia to drive up the oil prices, to make lots of money. Those folks have decided that middle America needs to be canceled and they all need to be poorer to save the environment. They want to drive down living standards. They want to eradicate the American middle class. Those folks have decided that we need an all-out police state to silence dissent. And if you don't agree with them, you ain't welcome in the Democratic Party. That's what the woke fascists believe. That is what they believe. And I mean, you are not allowed to oppose their police state. You are not allowed to oppose their driving down of living standards. You are not allowed to oppose their threats and their escalations internationally. And yeah, I mean, you have to leave the Democratic Party.
Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love Tulsi Gabbard. That was amazing. All right. I'm writing it down. We'll talk about that. I mean, that was amazing. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard is tremendous. Tulsi Gabbard is amazing. She is great. I love Tulsi Gabbard a lot. And we're going to be playing, she's got her YouTube channel now. We're going to play a lot of Tulsi Gabbard stuff on this channel. She is awesome. And, she's against the low-wage police state. She's against the danger of World War III. And, I wouldn't talk about anti-white racism because that's not, I don't see it that way, right? The police thing, there would be more nuance for me. But, why did Karl Marx support Abraham Lincoln? Was Abraham Lincoln a communist? No. Was Abraham Lincoln even completely anti-racist? No. I mean, his views changed during the Civil War, according to W.E.B. Du Bois. But, for much of his career, even though he opposed slavery, Abraham Lincoln did believe in racism. But Lincoln was on the right side. There was a divide in the ruling class between the Southern plantation owners that were in with the big bankers in Wall Street and in London who liked, wanted cheap cotton for the textile mills of Britain and wanted to make money from insuring the slave exports and wanted to keep the South in a primitive agrarian economy. And then there were the industrial capitalists of the North who wanted to advance the living standards, and there was a division in the ruling class over the slave system. There was a division in the ruling class when it came to slavery. And Karl Marx knew what side he was on. Karl Marx stood with Lincoln. Karl Marx was the London correspondent for the New York Tribune. The Republican Party newspaper of New York City hired Karl Marx as its London correspondent. And who was the editor of the New York Tribune? Horace Greeley, a socialist and a Republican, who said, "Go west, young man." Karl Marx worked for the Republicans, the Fox News of the 1860s, the New York Tribune, the Republican Party aligned media of the 1860s. That's who Karl Marx worked for. Karl Marx worked for Fox News, folks. He worked for Fox News, right? Horace Greeley was the top Republican, and Karl Marx got hired by Horace Greeley's newspaper. Why did he do it? Why did he do it? Why did he do it? Because he understood who was right and who was wrong. He understood there was a division in the ruling class, that he needed to take a side. Folks, if you want to do anything in politics that's real, you have to attach yourself to really existing social forces. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. They think they can just do their thing on the internet. They think they can just sit there and be like, well, I have the true interpretation of Marx and Trotsky and Enver Hoxha or whatever. No. Marx saw real forces clashing in the United States. The slave system clashing. The slave system clashing with the capitalist system, the Northern industrial capitalist system. And Karl Marx sided with the industrial capitalists. Karl Marx took a stand. And because Karl Marx took that stand, because the communists chose to support Abraham Lincoln, August Willich, a member of the Communist International Working Men's Association, became a brigadier general in the Union Army. Joseph Wedemeyer formed an entire communist division, the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment. The labor unions expanded as they got back in the war effort. Thank you, Yogi Fish, for the super chat. Real politics means you attach yourself to really existing social forces. You really want to make a change. And shout out to my good friend Tyler. Tyler's watching. Shout out to you, Tyler. You're awesome, Tyler. If you really want to make a change, you have to attach yourself to something real. There are contradictions that exist in the world. You have to align yourself with one side. Right now, the main danger is woke fascism. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to necessarily agree with everything. And look, I criticize Tulsi a little bit, but it's the Tulsi Gabbards and the Carrie Lakes and the Trumps and the Ron DeSantises that represent some level of resistance to this, despite their problems. And we need to come to terms with this. It's funny. I saw the Communist Party is tweeting about how democracy is up for a vote coming up. It's ironic because they're kind of right about it, but not in the way they're saying. Democracy is up for vote in a lot of ways. And it's pretty clear that it's the Democratic side that wants to set up a fascist state, have an all-out war with Russia, drive down living standards. That's the way things are here. Meanwhile, there is a confused right-wing opposition. And it's confused. And that's where people who can still think and still don't blindly support the FBI, that's where you find those people. And if you're a progressive in the United States, if you're genuinely progressive, meaning you want better schools and better healthcare and better education, you want to raise living standards for the population, you don't want a low-wage police state, you don't want a new world war. If you're genuinely progressive at this point, you have to see that there are divisions within the ruling class. There are divisions within the ruling class, and that there is one main danger coming at us. And there's not much more to it than that. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to recognize, but trust me, I tried to be part of the BreadTube universe and just engage with those people. Oh no, you're a Nazi. You're a Nazi. Right? They didn't just say you're wrong. No, you're a Nazi. You're the equivalent of a Nazi. You deserve to be beaten up and killed. These people want nothing to do with you. You genuinely believe in socialism, they want nothing to do with you. If you genuinely believe in Marxism, they want nothing to do with you. If you genuinely want a better world, they want nothing to do with you. And there are some dissident elements that are challenging them. So that's kind of my opening remarks for this afternoon, folks. It's a little bit before 1 p.m. here, but we got some super chats. So why don't we do a roll call? I'll call people out as I see them, names and locations. And then I'll start answering super chats. If people have more super chat questions, by all means, shoot them. That's the second half of the show is all you guys. I mean, it's your super chats that make the second half of the show happen. So shoot me a super chat if there's something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show. Questions, comments, concerns. And let's start doing it. So we got Hugo from the Netherlands. We got Log in Scotland. Shout out to the European folks. It's a much better time of day. Tyler in Missouri. Shout out to you, Tyler. Hugo from the Netherlands. QC from LA County. Christian from Bergen County, Sussex, UK. Bill in Maryland. Quinn and Meredith in Eatonville, Washington. Ben in Hungary. Ireland. Bob C in Ireland. I told you this was a great time for Europe. Bartik in Poland. Milan, Italy. It's like a European hour. Chester in England, right? We got Featherston in New Zealand. We got John McCarthy in Chicago. Shout out to you, John. Seamus in Ireland. Combate in England. Abram in France. A Better America in Michigan. Pasta Bazooka. Zier, Denmark. We got Steve and Ann in Ringgold, Georgia. We got Red in Chile. We got Lalo in Hungary, San Quentin, California, New York, Pasta Bazooka, the Russian Federation. We got Vlad, Kathmandu, Nepal, Illinois, Johnson, William Kane in Gatesheld, England. Good stuff, folks. Lawrence Johnson in Illinois. Charlie in Boston. Danny from Boston, Charlie in Boston, Cape Town, South Africa, Yu Chi Chan, Joshua Jones in Illinois, behind enemy lines in the UK, Istanbul, Max the Sax in Virginia. Shout out to you, Max the Sax, Maxwell the Saxwell. Very good, very, very good, very, very good. Very good. Johnny Blaze in Virginia. Shout out to you, Johnny. Sarasota, Florida is with us today. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Good stuff. Got a lot of things to talk about. I've been making a list of stuff to talk about on streams while I was away. So I'm going to be streaming a lot more, like I said. This is an early afternoon stream. I might do an evening stream tonight, actually, just because. We shall see. Mike in North Carolina. Good stuff. All right. So if you got more super chats, shoot them my way. So the first things first. Marjorie Taylor Greene said Republicans will not spend another money on Ukraine. Well, I'll just be honest with you, folks. As much as I appreciate the fact that Tulsi Gabbard and Marjorie Taylor Greene and some other Republicans are talking that way, don't count on it. Look, I remember I've been flashing back in the lead up to these elections coming up to 2006. 2006, Bush was president, and it was his second term, and everything was awful. The economy was starting to get worse. The war in Iraq, everyone was sick of it. The torture and the country, Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005, and all these black people were left on their rooftops to die. And 2005, the Bush administration started really tanking in their second term. 2006, they had a midterm election. And I was 19 years old, and I was a college student, and I was hanging around with Maoist groups, and we had protests, drive out the Bush regime, and we were out there, we were the anti-war people. And right before the midterm elections, they gave us lots of attention. All of a sudden, the media started paying attention to the activist left that was against the war in Iraq, that was against torture, that was calling Bush a racist, etc. Why? Well, because that's what people were going to vote for. And in 2006, midterm elections, the Democrats swept. They got the House, they got the Senate. The unpopular Bush administration was floundering. And what people were actually going to vote for, at that point was anti-war sentiments, anti-imperialist sentiments, anti-police state sentiments, anti-racist sentiments that were coming from the left. But Nancy Pelosi got in there and became Madam Speaker, the first female Speaker of the House. And Bernie Sanders became the first socialist in the Senate. I am the first socialist ever to be elected in the Senate. I am Bernie Sanders. And the Democrats kept the war going in Iraq. And nothing changed. But the Democrats were using the sentiment. And I honestly, as much as I appreciate, there may be some among the Republicans that are more sincere. But even among the Republicans, the pro-war neocon stuff is still, most of the bulk of the Republican Party are completely on board with the deep state apparatus. Let's just be real, right? Now, if the Republicans have a sweep, that would be good, in my opinion, because it would send a message that the public is repudiating what Biden is doing. But at the same time, nothing's really going to change. I don't think that a Republican sweep is going to lead to the USA withdrawing from Ukraine, right? I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that there's enough energy in the Republican Party to stand up to the police state. Thoughts on the new Italian prime minister? Very good question. But I appreciate it. And I mean, the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene is more anti-war than the squad, the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, money for American jobs and families, not for Ukraine. I mean, it shows that again, the left is the main danger. But, do I think that a Republican sweep is going to lead to a reversal of U.S. policy on Ukraine? I don't think so. Let's hope. I mean, you can always hope, right? It would be great if it happened. Wouldn't it be great if it happened? Wouldn't that be awesome? That would be awesome if it happened. But I wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't count on it. Wouldn't count on it. That's my feeling about that. So, yeah, next question. Why aren't more people talking about the raids on the African Socialist Party? This is from John McCarthy. It's also related to his question about, he says they didn't receive donations from Russia. Well, I trust Chairman O'Malley on that. The African People's Socialist Party, if they say they didn't get money from Russia, then they didn't get money from Russia. Kelly a Bonapartist? All right, that's a good question. If that's what they say, then they didn't. But at the same time, if they did, so what? Right? I mean, the civil rights movement in the United States got a lot of support historically from Cuba, from China, and from Russia. China, Mao met with Robert F. Williams, the leader of the Deacons for Defense and the NAACP of North Carolina, after he had a shootout with the Ku Klux Klan. Radio Free Dixie, which was a revolutionary black radio program, was broadcast from Cuba into the southern United States, preaching black liberation. The Soviet Union constantly exposed the racism in the United States. At the United Nations, they took William L. Patterson, a famous African-American communist leader. They gave him a platform at the United Nations to expose the horrors of Jim Crow segregation. Let's not forget that the U.S. government declared the Civil Rights Congress of the Communist Party USA. They declared it to be a subversive organization. They weren't even allowed to put up bail for people because of their ties to the Soviet Union. So the idea, if this black liberation group got some money from Russia, so what? I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to such a thing, but they say they didn't. They say they didn't. I trust them on that. Who am I to say otherwise? I'll have to look into Charlie Crist. But, they say they didn't. They say they didn't. But the FBI raids against the African People's Socialist Party, again, I don't want to dwell on drama, but I just want to say this. It was very clear to me that other forces were involved in this hit piece on me. And one of the things that made it blatantly clear was that they tried their hardest to cancel our Chicago conference. We had an amazing conference in Chicago. Tara Reid, the victim of Joe Biden, spoke. The African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, they spoke. And right before that conference, the people who put that hit piece out on me, one of them said on the phone, "You're going to cancel the conference, aren't you? So you're going to cancel the conference, right?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, we're going to put this out during the conference. It's going to really embarrass you during the conference." And I said, "Well, I don't care. We're still doing the conference." Now, if these people were just concerned about problems in our organization, why would they be so determined to make sure we didn't give a platform to Tara Reade, give a platform to the Uhuru movement after they got raids by the FBI? What happened was they were, and the whole conference, I turned off all my social media. I turned off I deleted Facebook from my phone, deleted Twitter from my phone. I still don't have them on my phone. It's demon apps, seriously. I mean, I'm here on YouTube, but it's, you know, I said, all right, whatever happens, happens. I have got a job to do and I'm going to do it. The whole conference. And I said, if you hear about it during the conference, don't tell me about it. I said, don't tell me about it. And that speech I gave in Chicago, go watch that speech. I warned you this all was going to happen. I said they're telling lies about me and they're just getting started. And I said, I doubt I told you all it was going to happen because I knew this was coming. And yeah, I could have been a punk. I could have been a punk like they wanted me to. I could have said, oh, you're right. You know what? I'm scared. They're going to say nasty things about me on the internet. I'm calling the conference off. Didn't do it. As much as that's what these people wanted. They really wanted me to get so scared that I would call off the conference. Well, I didn't do it. I did that. That conference in Chicago was amazing. It was an amazing conference. And, you know, keep in mind when you watch those videos, I did that with the threat of this character assassination hanging over my head. I did that while being more or less blackmailed by these people. So if you have any doubt in my organizational capabilities, my ability to get the job done under stressful circumstances, right? People have got your deepest, darkest personal secrets, your sexual family drama that's nobody's business, that doesn't belong on the internet. And they're telling you they're about to put it out on the internet and they're going to give it to Vosh and they're going to give it to all your enemies and they're all going to use it against you. And I buckled down and I said, I'm doing this anyway. So if you have any doubt that I can get the job done, that should dissuade you. Some people say, oh, Caleb shouldn't be a leader. Well, I'm not running for Congress. I'm not trying to be the president, but I am the leader of the Center for Political Innovation. I am going to keep having events and keep having conferences, and I can do it under the tough circumstances. I can do it. I am capable of getting shit done, folks. I am capable of getting shit done. If you ever have any doubts about my abilities, go and watch those tapes. I did all of that with the threat of a vicious personal smear hanging over my head, and I still did it. I still did it. I did all of that with those threats hanging over my head. That's who I am. That requires a level of strength that some of these people could only dream of. So don't tell me, oh, Caleb's not fit for leadership anymore. Well, leadership of what? I'm not fit to be streaming? Well, here I am. There's 200 people watching me right now. I think I am. You know, oh, I'm not fit to write books anymore. Not fit to have conferences. Fuck you. Fuck you. You could only dream of doing what I'm capable of doing. You left book losers. You know, these people, give me a break. Give me a break. I'm right here. I'm standing strong. I said in my speech, they're not going to cancel us. They're not going to destroy us. They're not going to erase us. I meant it. We are right here and we are not going away, motherfuckers. I'm right here. I am right here. So there you go. And if you have any doubt that these people were not just working for themselves, ask yourself why. Garland Nixon was there. You can ask Garland Nixon. He's talked about it on his streams. I told them I was sitting with Garland Nixon and the other people who spoke at the conference, and I said, look, they're telling me that they're going to come out with this in the middle of the conference. That's what Garland Nixon said. He said, this clearly comes from the government. This clearly comes from somebody. This clearly comes from the deep state, because why would they try to stop the conference, right? If it was just some kind of, if it was just some people who were mad about something, then why would they try to stop the conference? Thank you, John. And I didn't cancel the conference. And we're going to have more conferences, maybe this spring. I don't know when. But I'm not surrendering. I'm not giving up, and you can ask Garland. I sat there in the lobby of the hotel and I told different conference speakers about it. We knew this was coming and we did it anyway, because the Uhuru movement are under attack. There's a group of black people who are fighting for their community against the deep state, against the Biden green woke fascists. When they're under attack, we got to do this conference. When they're trying to start a new world war with Russia, and they're killing people in Ukraine, killing Russian-speaking people, we got to do this conference, right? This was COINTELPRO, if there ever was one. And we did it anyway. We stood up to it because it's not about me. It's not about my personality. It's not about trying to convince you that I'm the best person. I never make any mistakes. It's about fighting the goddamn imperialists. That's what it's about. It's about standing up against this criminal international oligarchy, this global financial system that is grinding people all over the world into poverty. That's what it's about. And if we're not willing to take blows, we're not willing to take attacks, take scars, we're not willing to make alliances with people who we might not agree with, people that we never thought we might make an alliance with. If we're not willing to be like Karl Marx and work for the Fox News, New York Tribune of 1860, and work for the Republicans and Abraham Lincoln, if we are not willing to be like the Soviet Union that aligned with U.S. imperialism to defeat the Nazis, if we're not willing to do what needs to be done to get the job done, then we ain't worthy of the name, right? And I'm in this for real, folks. I am in this for real. I was, when we were cleaning up, when I was moving and cleaning up, I found a lot of items. One of these streams later, I'm going to show you some different items to kind of let you know that I'm in this for real. But well, thank you, Leon. I do appreciate that. But I'm in this for real, and I don't care. Tunnel vision, folks. I'm tired of the internet drama. I'm tired of it. I'm really tired of it. I got shit to do, right? And internet drama gets me views. I don't want to play that game anymore. I'm really tired of having internet wars and internet feuds with people. It's destructive. It's toxic. It's not productive. Right? I am here to teach anti-imperialism and Marxism. I am here to explain what's going on in the world. I got plenty more to talk about, and that's what we're going to do. Next question. All right. Why did Khrushchev make the secret speech? Very good question. Khrushchev made the secret speech in 1956 because of the fact that he wanted to negotiate with the United States. Right? The Cold War was going on. The Soviet Union was being forced to spend huge amounts of money on their military budget. And the Soviet Union was aligned with a wave of anti-colonial liberation struggles that were happening in Africa and Asia and other places. And Khrushchev really wanted the USA to de-escalate the arms race. He wanted the USA to sit down and negotiate with him. And so the Soviet Union wouldn't have to spend so much money on their nuclear arsenal. And so he hoped that by sending a message to the United States, don't worry, I'm not like Stalin. I'm not the extremist like Stalin, that he could do that. I thought Space Channel improved significantly. Oh, I love them. They're great. Space Communism, great. Fox and Alex. Oh, they're great, folks. I love them. Love them. They are awesome. And so it was a gesture, it was a grovel to the imperialists, right? Stalin, let's pull up Stalin's last speech. Let's pull up the last speech of Stalin. The very last speech that Stalin ever gave. The last speech, Stalin's final words, 1952, right? What does he say? His speech to the Soviet Congress, October 14th, 1952. What does he say? He says, "It is understood that our party must do its duty by its fraternal parties and support them and their peoples in the struggle for liberation and in the struggle for keeping peace. That's what the party does." Stormy applause. After the seizure of power by our party in 1917, our party took real measures to eliminate the yoke of capitalist landlords and representatives of their fraternal parties. Inspired by our daring and our success, gave it the name Shock Brigade of the revolutionary movement and the workers' movement of the world. Thereby, they expressed the hope that the success of the Shock Brigade would alleviate the sufferings of the people and the situation of being under capitalist yoke. I think our party has fulfilled these hopes, especially in the time of the Second World War, as the Soviet Union smashed German and Japanese fascist tyranny and liberated the European and Asian peoples from the danger of fascist slavery. Of course, it was a very difficult to fulfill this honorable task as long as there's only one shock brigade, as long as it stood alone, the avant-garde and for the fulfillment of the task. But that is the past. Now it's completely different. Now China and Korea and Czechoslovakia and Hungary, the new shock brigades have appeared on the map in the form of people's democracies. Now the struggle has been eased for our party and the works proceed better. Special attention must be paid to the communist, democratic, worker, and peasant parties that are not yet in power, which must carry out their work under the yoke of strict bourgeois rule. Of course, their work is more difficult, but their work is not so difficult as it was for the Russian communists in the time of the Tsar, as the smallest step forward was declared a serious crime. The Russian communists nevertheless held firm and did not retreat from the difficulties that came to victory. The same will be the case for these parties. That was Stalin's last speech. It ends with, "Long live our fraternal parties, long live the health of the fraternal parties, and long live the peace between peoples." That was the last speech that Stalin ever gave. 1952, October 14th. That was Stalin basically saying, socialism's moving ahead. Socialism is rolling forward. That's what Stalin was saying. And so Khrushchev had to differentiate himself. Khrushchev had to say, oh, no. Oh, no, I can't be associated with that. Oh, boy, that's a scary thing there that Stalin was talking about. If I'm going to be able to negotiate with the United States, I gotta make sure no one thinks I'm one of those. Oh, boy, I can't be associated with that. Oh, dear. I don't want people to think I'm a wild-eyed radical like that. Oh, I can't do such a thing. Oh, boy. So Khrushchev came out and he gave a speech about how Stalin was this crazy authoritarian tyrant who wasn't a good ally for the United States during World War II, and he threw Stalin under the bus. It was a gesture to the U.S. imperialists. It was saying, we want to negotiate. And actually, some pretty good analysis of that you can find here in this book, The History of the Party of Labor of Albania. Because Albania, they stood with China and they denounced the secret speech. And I think I'll pull up where they talked about this. It's an Albanian book, so the index is in the back. There we go. But what did they call it? You read the Party of Labor of Albania's criticism of the Khrushchevite revisionists at the second meeting. Right. And they basically, I forget how they put it, but they described how there was an alliance between the Khrushchev leadership of the Soviet Communist Party. There's an alliance between them and the U.S. imperialists to try and stop the global colonial revolution. Right. The people around the world in Africa and Asia and Latin America were rising up against colonialism, rising up against U.S. imperialism. In Africa, many African countries, you had Kwame Nkrumah, was the leader of Ghana, was building socialism. You had eventually Julius Nyerere taking power in Tanzania. You had so many revolutionary movements. And Khrushchev went to the U.S. imperialists, went to Kennedy, and he said, all right, I will tell the people in the colonized world to call it off, to hold off, to back down, if you will de-escalate the arms race and give us détente. And Mao wasn't going to have it. Mao said, no. No, we are fighting anti-colonial revolution to the end. And Khrushchev said, no, we're going to negotiate. And part of setting the stage for that conciliatory approach to U.S. imperialism was the secret speech. Now, what's interesting is the Soviet Union didn't stick with this because the USA didn't keep its end of the bargain, right? The USA did not keep its end of the bargain. The USA escalated the Vietnam War during the détente with the Soviet Union. The USA attacked Czechoslovakia in 1968, Prague Spring. The USA destabilized Czechoslovakia. The Soviet Union had to send their military in. And by about 1969, the Soviet Union said, okay, fine, right? USA, you said that, we would call off the anti-colonial revolutions around the world. So China was, and you weren't going to listen. So starting in about 1968, 1969, the Soviet Union started escalating their support for revolutionary movements around the world. In Angola, in Afghanistan, in Latin America, things started to change. Meanwhile, China, because the Soviet Union had cut them off, they drifted into a more pro-U.S. foreign policy. That was the Gang of Four period in China after the fall of Lin Biao. The Cold War is fascinating to me. The dynamics of the Cold War, the way that that after the death of Stalin, the Soviet Union moves into a conciliatory period of détente with the United States. So China thrusts ahead as the revolutionary country, but China is cut off by the Soviet Union. They're weakened. They're isolated. And so China eventually drifts into the U.S. camp. And then the Soviet Union, during the Brezhnev years, it becomes more revolutionary again, right? The Soviet Union starts aligning, and that, Cuba and Libya under Gaddafi, they start, escalating their support for anti-colonial revolutions. And, it shows that it's a chess game. It's a global chess game, right? Geopolitics is like that. And I understand why China was forced to drift into the U.S. camp. They were forced because they were cut off. The Soviet Union cut them off, and they didn't have material aid, and they were a huge country that was very poor at the time, and they needed foreign investment. So China was basically forced by the United States to drift into the U.S. camp. So, yeah, I mean, it's all fascinating to me. If you really want to learn some of this important history, I would read, Imperialism and the Crisis in the Socialist Camp by Sam Marcy. It's a very good pamphlet. Yeah, so there you go. All righty. Thoughts on the new Italian prime minister? Again, it's a revolt against liberalism. She's not a socialist. She's not a communist. She's from the right wing. She's a conservative. She's, from the radical right, but she's rejecting the European Union. She's rejecting the Great Reset. She's rejecting the woke green fascism with a rainbow flag on it that's being forced on people throughout the world. And she's not as excited about confrontation with Russia. She's not as excited about, vaccine mandates and lockdowns. And she sees some flaws in the emerging liberal order. I mean, again, folks, you don't have to agree with everything that she says to recognize that her getting in there is a rejection of the neoliberal world order. It is, right? The neoliberal West. And because the left is so compromised and pathetic, it's the right wing that is giving voice to opposition to the, the liberal order. So, I see her in a somewhat positive light, but I recognize that her ideology is different than mine. She's from the right. I'm from the left. But at the same time, I'm from the real left, and the fake left is the main danger at this point. So she's better than who she was running against. And folks, if socialists and communists aren't willing to de-wokeify, they're worthless. I'm serious about that. I'm not saying that people should, that means you have to come out swinging against trans people or something like that. It doesn't mean you should have to, become anti-abortion or something like that. But I'm saying if leftists and communist groups are not willing to de-wokeify, they're worthless. They're worthless at this point. I mean, they're part of the problem at that point. Wokeness is the greatest threat right now. That could change. And keep in mind, folks, that could very easily change. Things could flip, right? So again, let's not assume this is a permanent tactical orientation. That's what these fake leftists have done. They've always assumed that fight the right wing, fight the Republicans. That's just all they do, right? It started out as a tactic under the Roosevelt administration because it was correct, because Roosevelt was aligned with the labor movement, was friendly to the Soviet Union, and he was in an alliance against the far right wing. So fight the right wing started out as a tactic under Roosevelt. And then these people, their kids did it, and they lived through McCarthyism, and then their kids saw how bad the right wing could be. And so they said, oh boy. And so they became, they went in with they continued this. And now people like Joe Sims have never learned anything else. They've never learned anything else. That's all they know is fight the right wing. Well, fight the right wing ain't the answer in this time period, folks. Fight the right wing is a recipe for disaster because the right wing is the only place where people are still allowed to think, as bad as it is. If you cannot de-wokeify If a communist organization, a communist group, a communist internet personality cannot de-wokeify, they cannot break with wokeism, break with breadtube, break with the synthetic left, they're worthless. They're part of the problem. You have to de-wokeify. You have to de-wokeify at this point. That doesn't mean you have to be all on board with supporting Trump. That doesn't, but you have to de-wokeify. You have to de-wokeify. You have to de-wokeify. The wokes are the main danger. And they tell us so. Every day they tell us so on social media. Because we don't agree with war with Russia, because we defend anti-imperialist countries, they want us killed. Is Bukele a Bonapartist? Absolutely, Bukele is a Bonapartist. He is the leader of El Salvador, and he's aligning with China and bringing in infrastructure. He's asserting levels of state control over the economy to ensure development. He's not a socialist. He's not a communist, but he's an anti-imperialist, and he's definitely a Bonapartist. He is asserting, the power of his wing over a wing of the ruling class over El Salvador, and moving El Salvador in an anti-imperialist direction. And it's had a very good impact in terms of jobs and healthcare. So, the ruling class shifts the dominant ideology from left to right, depending on our conditions, to sow discord. Exactly, Heather. You got it exactly right. You've got it exactly right. And there very well may come a time where it's like during the Bush years, where it's the right wing that is the main danger. During the Bush years, that was absolutely the case, right? If the situation changes in 24 hours, the tactics must also change in 24 hours. The problem with the communist groups in the United States is that they have not changed their tactics in 50 fucking years. In 50 years, these people have not changed their tactics. So, that's the problem. But yes, right now, being part of the anti-woke agenda, that's where I'm at. And I resisted it. I grew up in a right-wing town, and, I sympathize with trans people who get bullied, and I have many trans friends, and, I'm never going to become somebody who bullies people because of their sexual identity or their background. I'm never going to become somebody who hates immigrants. My wife is an immigrant. I love my wife deeply. I'm never going to become somebody who supports police brutality. I've been arrested in police brutality demonstrations. I'm never going to become a regular right-winger, okay? But I know what the main danger is right now. So there you go. Jeff Young is giving his last campaign press event at 2 p.m. Eastern on Facebook. Great work, Jeff. I hope he can come on this stream. He's watched it. I know he's left comments on these videos. He's a great guy. I'm excited about him. But yeah, and there may come a time where we have to change our tactics, but right now that's where things are at. I don't know about Charlie Christ in Florida. I like Carrie Lake because she Carrie Lake, I don't agree with a lot of her policies, but she's standing up to the cancel culture. She's made her whole campaign against kind of a revolt against wokeness. We'll play some Carrie Lake videos on here another time. Look, across the country, the American people are tired of wokeness. They're tired of the woke fascism. They're tired of being told that they deserve to be poorer to fight Putin. They should accept the inflation and the high gas prices because, Putin's so bad. Ukraine is so bad. They're tired of being afraid to say what they want, of being canceled on social media. They're tired of the wars. They're tired of police state repression. And I think that we're going to see a sweep by the Republicans. That's what I think is going to happen. But it could change. We don't know. And our job as people in the center of the empire, our job is to stand in opposition to U.S. imperialism and to stand in opposition to the way they're pushing things. And, the woke stuff, that is the main face of fascism in the time that we're living in. So we're just going to have to deal with that. So there you go. I might be live later tonight, folks. I don't know. We'll just have to see how the day goes. I have a meeting with somebody later today. I've got a few things I got to take care of around the house, but I might be live later tonight. Just get used to it, folks. We're going to be streaming all the time. There's going to be a whole lot of streaming going on because we got this whole room, and I'm ready to get shit done. I've missed you all for so long. We're back, folks. We're back. So yeah, folks. I guess we'll end for today. For this moment, but we might be back later tonight. We'll see. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night, folks. Good afternoon, I should say. Hopefully I'm back later today. If not, I'll be back the next day.